Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Who said it was too early to start talking about Halloween Horror Nights 2026? We're already hearing a lot of interesting properties, rumors, stuff getting thrown around in the mix in regards to HHN 2026, so let's talk about it. Coming off a very successful 2025, I think one of the most successful HHNs in recent memory, it's only natural we're already talking about 2026 and some of the stuff that we can expect to see at the event. We're going to talk about some of these properties that are getting thrown around for 2026. A lot of these are really big names that we've been wanting to see for a little while, and it looks like this might finally be the year that we get to see a lot of these properties. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it, shall we? There is stuff that we already know about the 2026 event. For instance, we already know the dates for Halloween Horror Nights 2026, which are September 3rd through November 1st, meaning the event is going to start a little bit earlier next year than it did this year. We also know that John Murdy is deep into the creation of HHN 2026, working on various treatments, and so there is a basis for a lot of these properties that are getting thrown out there. So given how popular the 2025 event was, we can anticipate Universal will want to recreate a lot of that success in 2026, whether that be by reusing some of the properties that were successful in 2025 or identifying some of the reasons why those properties were such a big hit at the event. One of those properties that's getting thrown around this year, which is kind of a no-brainer, and it's one that I do anticipate will come to the 2026 event, is going to be Stranger Things. Now, Stranger Things is one that has been at Halloween Horror Nights pretty much for 3 years now. We saw it for the first time back in 2018. With the new season of Stranger Things that just hit Netflix recently, I do expect this to be a possibility for something that we could see. Universal does have a pretty good working relationship with Netflix, and it is a pretty big property that has brought a lot of success to the park before. So it pretty much checks off all the boxes. It is one that, again, I do think we are likely to see in 2026, in my honest opinion. With that, another of those big headliner IPs that they could be interested in possibly bringing back to the event could be something like Five Nights at Freddy's, which we know last year was such a huge success. We just recently saw the release of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 from Blumhouse, which could be something that Universal might be wanting to adapt into a full-fledged haunted attraction. Me personally, myself, I do think this is a possibility, but I don't see this happening in 2026. I do think that there might be a little bit of like a gap year in between the Five Nights at Freddy's attractions, being that they are pretty big in scale. The house that we saw in 2025 was one of the most ambitious that we've ever seen at the event before, and it did require quite a lot of work in regards to like special effects with the animatronics and like those big sets as well too. So I could see them taking a break from this year and bringing it back in 2027 when the third film kind of comes around, having like a tie-in in that sort of sense, with the second film being adapted as a haunted house. I do see that as more of a possibility than it coming back this year. But if it does happen to come in 2026, I personally wouldn't be surprised, again, just given how big the property was for the event in 2025. The maze saw up to 3-hour wait times on some nights. It was the first maze to ever use the Transformers queue as a part of the extended queue for the maze, which was kind of incredible, honestly. So if it does end up coming back, I wouldn't be surprised at all, but I personally myself don't think it will. With that, another of those big properties from the 2025 event that has a possibility of coming back sometime in the future would of course be Terrifier. Now this is another one that saw incredible wait times in the 2025 event, stuff up to 3 hours on some nights. So if it does end up coming back, I wouldn't be surprised myself. Again, like with Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't think this will come back for 2026. I think this is one where, again, they might want to take a little bit of a gap year, maybe bring it back in 2027. I think the fourth film is rumored to come out sometime around 2027, so that would make a lot more sense in regards to like the marketing of the overall property. But if it does end up coming back, again, I wouldn't be surprised. It was very popular last year, and if they do end up bringing back the character of Art the Clown, I'm sure it would be a welcome addition to audiences who absolutely adored the character last year at the event. One of the things that I do think is most likely to happen for the 2026 event, since they will go off based on that success of Terrifier in 2025, will be to incorporate some other kind of clown into the event, given that people just love to see clowns at Halloween Horror Nights. The clown scares one last year was such a huge hit. Now there are a couple of options that we've been hearing get thrown around as to what they could do. One of the big ones would be, of course, to bring Pennywise to the event from the franchise. Now this is one that we've been wanting to see at Halloween Horror Nights for such a long time. It hasn't necessarily happened, given that relationship between Warner Brothers and Universal was a little bit shaky when it comes to that property, given that Warner Brothers had utilized that property in a lot of their own attractions over the years, so it was something that was a little bit kind of considered off limits for Universal. But now with the recent news of like the Warner Brothers Netflix or Warner Brothers Paramount merger that is going to be happening and will probably be completed by the time Halloween Horror Nights rolls around, I do see Universal getting a lot more access to Warner Brothers properties, despite on who wins the deal. You know that Universal has a pretty good relationship with Netflix, so if they end up taking over Warner Brothers as a whole, I do see a lot more of those Warner Brothers properties being handed over to Universal as far as like theme park rights go, Same deal with Paramount as well too. If Paramount does end up scooping up Warner Brothers from under Netflix's feet, I do see this again as being a win for Universal as far as like theme park attractions go. We do again have a pretty good relationship with Paramount. We've done stuff with them before, like A Quiet Place, obviously the Transformers ride. So regardless on who ends up winning the rights for Warner Brothers, I do think it is going to be a win for Universal and properties at the theme park overall. So with that, I think it is a very strong contender to come to Halloween Horror Nights. Pennywise is popular. It's something that we haven't seen at the event before. The 2017 remake would be just an incredible house overall to see. They could even incorporate stuff from Welcome to Derry, which has been a very big hit for HBO Max, which came out this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that at the event. If we even see like a Pennywise roaming character around the park, similar to how we saw Art the Clown last year, I think that would make a little bit more sense given that Pennywise does talk. So it could be a lot of fun to see something like that at the event. Another possibility, which I think is probably the most likely scenario, would be something along the lines of like a Hollywood Harry Jack the Clown mashup. Now, we first heard about this in Midsummer Scream last year when John Murdy kind of teased out a little bit about this. Now, with that hint at Midsummer Scream, a lot of people have been speculating and rumoring that this could be something related to like Jack the Clown meets Hollywood Harry. And I think that would be pretty cool to see as well too. I do believe that next year, 2026, is an anniversary year for Hollywood, so it would make sense to incorporate somebody like Jack the Clown, which was one of the first icons that John Murdy brought to Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood when the event first came back. The first one was a director, obviously, in 2006, but then Jack the Clown took the reins over in 2007. So it would be cool to see Jack come back to Hollywood. We do know that Universal has been trying to expand the Jack the Clown brand as a whole. He has been present in events over in Singapore. He is one of the icons over in Horror Unleashed in Las Vegas as well too. So I do see them kind of branching out the character a little bit more and trying to incorporate him into the Hollywood event as well too. And kind of a mashup with Hollywood Harry, I think would be a pretty cool idea. Now, if this does end up happening, I don't think that we will see both this and it at the event at the same time. So I do think the most likely scenario it is something to do with Jack the Clown. We could see Jack the Clown roaming around the park, even Hollywood Harry as well too. It would be cool to see them kind of like in different areas of the park and just kind of interacting with each other. I think that would be a lot of fun. Now, speaking on the news about Warner Brothers, I think one of the biggest properties that we can consider to get out of this Warner Brothers deal would be something that we've been wanting to see at Halloween Horror Nights for such a long time. And I think that this might finally be the year that we do end up getting it, and that would of course be The Conjuring. Now, we do know that they've been trying to bring The Conjuring to Halloween Horror Nights for a long time, but it never really worked out. Again, a lot of it has to do with like the rights issues or whatnot. It has been a property that has been featured at other haunts in Southern California. We've seen it at Six Flags. With that whole Warner Brothers accusation between Netflix or either Paramount, I do think that this is something that could benefit Universal. And this is definitely a property that I think that they are pretty much hungry to get their hands on. Insidious was such a big hit back in 2024, and people just kind of love those paranormal-esque haunted houses. And so I think that this is one that they've been trying to do for a long time, and I think that would be massively successful if they do end up bringing it to the event. So I do think that this is a very strong contender for one of the headliners for Halloween Horror Nights in 2026. In a world where they can get the rights to The Conjuring, I think 9 times out of 10 they will bring it to the event. It just makes so much sense from a marketing standpoint and from a popularity standpoint as well too. I think it has the potential to be a very scary house and one that's very popular with insane wait times similar to like Terrifier or Five Nights at Freddy's last year. Another of the big takeaways from 2025 that I'm sure Universal is considering for 2026 is the success of video game properties at the event. Now, last year we did see, of course, Five Nights at Freddy's, which was pretty big, and Fallout, which was pretty well regarded by a lot of the fans. So I do see them trying to explore more into this realm of video games and bringing video game properties to the event. There are 2 video games that are being thrown around right now, which I think are pretty big as to stuff that can come to the event. The first of those is Resident Evil. Now, Resident Evil is something that, again, we've been trying to see at Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood specific for a few years now. We haven't done it in Hollywood. There was a house over in Orlando back in 2013, I believe. And this is a property that is constantly featured over in the Japan event as well, too. So there is a little bit of a connection there between Universal and the property. So it is something that I think would be pretty accessible for them to get the rights to. Now, Resident Evil is supposed to be having a pretty big year in 2026, which would be a big reason to bring in a Halloween Horror Nights. There is a new video game coming out, Resident Evil 9, and there is a new film coming out from director Zach Kreger, who did Weapons. So just tying those 2 together, I think it makes perfect sense. I think this is the year to finally bring Resident Evil to life at Halloween Horror Nights. I think this is a property that makes a lot more sense as opposed to something like Fallout, which was horror adjacent, but not necessarily horror. It shouldn't be one that is too complicated to do. It is pretty much a lot in the realm of stuff like The Last of Us. There are some creature effects in there as well too, but it's not stuff that, again, should be too complicated for them to do. Not more so than Fallout was, so it is one that I do think has a very strong possibility of coming to the event. Another property that's getting thrown around with Resident Evil as something that could come to the event is something that we've actually seen at Hollywood before. and that is, of course, Silent Hill. Now, like Resident Evil, Silent Hill is having a little bit of a resurgence as of late. We are supposed to be getting a new Silent Hill movie coming out in theaters in January, so in about a month's time. I do see this as a scenario where we do get both of them this year. I don't think that both of them being video games kind of cancel each other out, as we were talking about with like Jack the Clown and It. I think that's a little bit more similar. I think just the fact that they're video games doesn't exactly, like I said, cancel them out. So I do see that as a possibility for something to come to the event. And on the topic of repeats, we have been seeing repeats over the last couple years at the event of stuff that we've seen before in the past. It started back with Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Most recently, we had Poltergeist, which was a maze that featured in 2018 and came back in 2025 as a straight one-for-one recreation, essentially. I do think that this will be the case again in 2026, where we will revisit another maze from the past that is recreated pretty much almost identical to the way it was in its original format. A lot of those properties that are getting thrown around right now would be Trick or Treat from 2018, The Shining from 2017, or even An American Werewolf in London from back in 2015. I think the sole purpose of these repeat houses is to reuse a lot of the stuff that they already have to kind of cut costs a little bit. So I do think that this will point something a little bit more into the realm of something like a Trick or Treat or The Shining, given that American Werewolf in London would be a little bit more expensive to do with all those puppets. So I do see something like Trick or Treat or The Shining coming back to Halloween Horror Nights this year. Slasher properties are also something that's kind of hot and in the moment right now. We did see a big success with Jason Universe last year. The year before that with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre maze, which kind of took an original approach, similar to how Jason Universe did. I do see something like that coming back this year in some form of iteration. Most likely candidate, in my honest opinion, when looking at the scope of things as a whole, would probably be Halloween. I know a lot of us would love to see a Nightmare on Elm Street maze. That one does seem very unlikely. So I do think the most likely scenario would be we get a Halloween maze that follows this sort of formula where it's kind of like a mashup of the entire franchise and like this kind of like original take on it. I know Michael Myers is a character that we've seen numerous times over the last couple of years at Halloween Horror Nights, but I do think that this is going to be the year that he does come back. And similar to Jason Universe, similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think it makes sense and it would be one that's pretty easy for them to do. Another of the big properties that was getting thrown around pretty early on, even before the 2025 season wrapped, was Hellraiser. Now, Hellraiser is one of those big horror properties that we've never seen at the event that people have been wanting to see for such a long time. It's one that I myself would really like to see. Now, for this one, I believe that the main issue with it not coming to the event in the past before had to do with the rights. Now, I do believe that the rights are currently sitting somewhere under Disney's banner, so I think that could be a little bit of an issue. But it has been getting thrown around. I think it would be one that would be pretty cool to see. I think it would be so cool and so amazing to see Pinhead at Halloween Horror Nights finally, and a lot of the Cenobites as well, too. I think it would make a fantastic haunted house. But again, not really too sure how that would work out with the rights issues. Original mazes have been pretty big over the last couple years as well, too, and I do anticipate that we will get a couple in 2026. Now, we heard last year from Murray that the Monstrous maze was going to be the last Monstrous maze that we saw at Halloween Horror Nights, but then he later on went on to tweet something kind of alluding to the fact that the Latin American mazes aren't necessarily done at HHN, so I do expect to see some kind of Latin American maze back in the Parisian Courtyard. It just makes sense for it as they keep the Plaza Day of the Dead themed again. Everything is kind of like in the same area like it has been over the last couple of years. So I do see something Latin American coming back to the Parisian Courtyard. Not necessarily in like the same format that Monstrous was, where it's kind of like a mashup sort of sense. Maybe something that's more central focused or whatnot. We have been hearing some people say that possibly we could see that scare zone we saw a couple years ago, the Mummy scare zone, develop into a full-fledged maze. I think that would be a pretty cool and interesting concept, something that they could consider, or perhaps maybe tackling just a full maze on one of the monsters that they featured over the last couple of years. Chupacabra has been one that people have been wanting to see for a long time, and I think that has potential to work as a full-fledged maze, similar to how El Cucuy did or La Llorona a few years ago. Other properties that we didn't really talk about that I'll just kind of mention briefly, which always have an opportunity of showing up to the event, stuff like Scream, which has been rumored, but we never really ever see it at the event. It's always a possibility to come to the event. We do have a new Evil Dead film coming out next year, Evil Dead Burn, which comes out in 2026. This is another one of those that I do think has a possibility, just given how we saw Evil Dead Rise a couple years ago. I do think that this could be one that would be easy to translate and easy to market with the new film coming out in 2026. Obviously, the return of the Universal Monsters isn't off the table. We did take a little bit of a break here last year with no Universal Monster mazes. I think that had kind of something to do with the inclusion of them over at Horror Unleashed and the Dark Universe over at Epic Universe, but this might be the year where we get them back at the event. In some capacity, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something Universal Monsters come back to Halloween Horror Nights. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that we've been hearing in regards to Halloween Horror Nights 2026. A lot of properties just kind of being thrown against the wall at this point, at this stage in the speculation season. We will get a little more clarification as the season goes on, as we hear some more stuff from John Murdy. We'll get a little bit of a clearer picture, but for right now, pretty much everything seems to be up in the air. But there are, again, stuff that we can go based off. Those central properties that we talked about, I do think have a pretty fair shot of coming to the event for 2026. So let me know down in the comments down below. Let me know what you think will be coming to Halloween Horror Nights 2026. Let me know which of these properties, if they did end up coming to the event, you would be the most excited to see. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to this channel. We will be doing a lot of HHN speculation videos, a lot of Universal videos in general, a lot of theme park stuff, horror, all that fun stuff. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Wishing everybody happy holidays, and I'll see you guys on the next one.